Hey everybody, welcome to Chem 127, Lesson 13. Longer intro there today. That's Steve Ray Vaughan's Couldn't Stand the Weather. Again, kind of fitting here for our second to the last lesson. In all previous versions of this course, before I recorded this part of this video, summer of 2014, this was the last lesson. But lo and behold, they issued another one of these climate reports, so now that this is the second to the last lesson. But where we are here is we're going to start bringing together this scientific case for global climate change, or for what's called anthropogenic climate change. Sometimes this is ACC, if you want to sound like cool in the policy lingo world. So the plan here for today is to go through this so-called IPCC AR report from 2007. Why go through a report that's now 6 years old? The reason is that I think this report is very well written and does a very good job of presenting the evidence and the status of the science in support of that evidence to the layperson. For better or for worse, in the 2013 report, which I will review in the next lesson, the science has gotten a lot more complex. The downside is it's a little harder for somebody in your shoes to understand, even in this version of the report that they call the Summary for Policymakers. Now, I'll talk about the IPCC in a second. The AR4 is the fourth assessment report from 2007. There are three working groups. Working Group 1 is the Scientific Assessment Group. And the Summary for Policymakers is sort of the dummies version of the report. Scientists don't communicate their ideas very well to non-scientific people. There's three versions of each report. There's the full technical summary, which is 300 or 400 pages. I can't read that. Or the full technical report, not the technical summary. The technical summary is 70, 80 pages. I'm supposed to be able to read that. I think if you're a specialist that's outside the climatology a little bit, but still an earth scientist to some form, you can do that. But if you're a chemist with a marginal background in atmospheric science, that's so on and so forth. The Summary for Policymakers is meant for you guys, and in particular, like, the U.S. Senate and the State Department and those people who are going to negotiate climate treaties and the like. I think that, a student that's had my course is well equipped to read this, but I don't think you'd be able to read this before taking this course. And the AR5 report, which the next lesson will be about, is a notch up in complexity such that I can read it after teaching this stuff for 10 years, but I think it's a little trickier. So the plan here anyway is going to be to go through this one first because I think it's more readable. And then we'll go through the second one and really highlight some of the updates. But it'll probably ultimately be kind of repetitive because this case was in pretty good shape in 2007. One more thing here. I'm going to ask you to write this final essay. I'm essentially going to go through this as I go through this and make the points for that final essay, which is for you to make a logical case in support of global climate change, in support of the scientific evidence for global climate change. So pay close attention. That's not me telling you have to believe it. I think it's a pretty solid argument. I think most of you will probably agree that. If you don't want to believe this and you want to go to work for some agency that's going to undermine climate science, it might even be more important to get this case straight, right? So what I'm going to ask you to do on that final essay is lay out the evidence in support of this thing. So pay close attention. I'll do this again in the next lesson, and it'll be very repetitive, so you'll get a second chance to pick this up. Homework number 7, by the way, will be in 3 parts. One for lesson 12, one for 13, one for lesson 14. So let's go forth here. And the first thing I'm going to do here in the first part of this is really just talk about the IPCC and what it is. Okay, this is their sort of PR graphic when they brought this together. They're trying to get you excited about this. This is the IPCC Fourth Assessment Report. Okay, amongst the 4 reports that were written, okay, there was 2,500 scientific expert reviewers. Okay, so they 800 contributing authors, 400 lead authors, 130 years countries, 6 years work, 1 report. There's really 4 reports. Okay. I just want to explain a little bit about process here. Okay, there's 450 lead authors between these 4 reports that they write. and it's really one report, I guess, broken up into 4 parts. It looks a lot like 4 reports to me. Okay, so these groups of lead authors for the things that they don't think they can handle, they go get contributing authors. These are all experts in the field, either faculty members or people working for government agencies or other entities that deal expressly with issues related to global climate, or in the case of some of the other reports, maybe energy technology and things like that. And then they don't just put their word on it, they go out and send it out to get comments on it, so that these other 200 or 2,500 people are the people that are there to make sure that this is legit. Okay, this is the norm in science whenever you put something together, usually a primary piece of work. You would, if you were to submit an article to a scientific journal, what they would do is take that journal, the editor would then send it out to get external review before the editor makes their decision. And that's definitely the highest standard of publishing. Most sort of publishing, say like magazines and the like, is subject to editorial bias of one form or another. And the editors of a magazine, even Scientific American or a newspaper, can certainly impress their tone on how the news reads. And in the scientific literature and the other academic literature, the editor is just a messenger. They put all that, collect all their commentary from outside the organization to try to make it as objective as possible. That has taken place here too, even though this is not primary work. This is really just a summary of the climate science that's been done out there and published in those academic and scientific research journals over the previous few years. So let me just say a few more things here about the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. First of all, that this is a collaboration between the United Nations and the World Meteorological Organization. Okay, so the idea here is this is the United Nations creating an entity with the World Meteorological Association, trying to create panels of the most qualified scientists to do a grand diagnostic problem. Now, some people think that there's some sort of conspiracy or bias against the United States and so on and so forth. And if you believe those things, nothing I say is going to change it. Personally, I'm glad we have something like a United Nations to try to solve problems in a global sense, even if it's not a perfect organization. It's what we got. And this seems to be a natural role for them to try to do a grand diagnostic of the climate system. This is the same sort of process that they did when they enacted the sort of Montreal Protocol and the like. They got the international community together and had them working on this. So the idea is you have this group of international authors review peer-reviewed scientific literature. That's that part where any primary research article is reviewed by other experts in the field before it's accepted. So this is not in addition, it's a peer-reviewed document. The working group 1 part is all drawn from the peer-reviewed scientific literature. So it's not just random BS that somebody grabbed off the internet. Okay, and they prepare this review and synthesis of the implications, and then they send it out for external review. And after this last report, the IPCC actually came and had an external group come in and audit the entire IPCC process. And they had some criticisms about how working groups 2 and 3 operate in terms of some of the literature. It wasn't a grand criticism. It didn't completely pull the rug out from what they were doing, but they were receptive to that criticism and made some changes to their process. I guess what I'm trying to convince you is that I think that this is a legit thing. Okay, there's 3 groups. There's a scientific basis group, there's sort of an impacts group, and then there's a what do we do about the problem group, and then there's the synthesis report, which brings them all together. Again, we're reading the working group 1 report, which is so-called physical science basis. It's not only been extensively reviewed, like I said, it's subject to a public forum. They have a public forum saying, all right, if you didn't get your swing at what we're saying here, you can show up at the public forum and have your comments entered into the written record if you don't like what this has to say. The language in these reports, as you'll gather as you read it, is very conservative. And I don't mean like politically conservative. I just think any bold statement they make is very guarded. And when they say likely or very likely or things like that, that has a specific probability percentage associated with it. So there you go. And a lot of people criticize the IPCC for being politically motivated. Their stance is very simple. This is a policy relevant issue, but they don't advocate any policy. Nowhere in any IPCC report does it say we should do X. It just simply says here are the options, and it's an attempt to convey the information to the policymakers so that they can make the policy. So that's sort of how this works. Okay. if you don't believe what I say about the IPCC, I think it's probably worthwhile to bring up some statements that some scientific societies, like for example, I belong to a professional organization called the American Chemical Society. This is what they have to say about the IPCC. Not sure where this link is coming up here. So this is from the American Chemical Society. By the way, the professional organization that all the chemists and chemical engineers that work for all the oil companies would belong to. This is the world's largest scientific organization. And their statement opens as follows. Careful and comprehensive scientific assessments have clearly demonstrated that the Earth's climate system is changing in response to growing atmospheric burdens of greenhouse gases and absorbing aerosol particles. IPCC 2007. So they're endorsing the IPCC work here. Climate change is occurring and is caused largely by human activities and poses significant risks for, and in many cases is already affecting, a broad range of natural and human systems. That comes from the National Research Council statement, which is a branch of the National Academy of Sciences, which I'll show you in a bit. Okay, so this is the gang that all the physicists belong to. And this is from, again, November 18th, 2007. This is right after this report came out. And it just says, emissions of greenhouse gas from human activities are changing the atmosphere in ways that affects the Earth climate. Blah, 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 blah. The evidence is incontrovertible. Global warming is occurring. Okay, so here's another group that believes what this report is saying. Okay. And from the people who actually study the climate, now there are some chemists and physicists that study the climate. Most of them also belong to this group called the American Geophysical Union. And this is their position statement. Notice that this came out in 2007 too. A whole bunch of these endorsement statements came out after the last IPCC report. And this one, I'll just read the first part of this. The Earth's climate is now clearly out of balance and is warming. Many components of the climate system, including the temperatures of the atmosphere, land, and ocean, the extent of seas, ice, mountain, glaciers, and the sea level, the distribution of precipitation, and the length of seasons, are now changing at rates and patterns that are not natural and are best explained by atmospheric abundances of greenhouse gases and aerosols generated by human activity during the 20th century. Okay, this is what the climate scientists think. Okay. And again, I think what's relevant here is the National Academy of Sciences. You're talking about this in your reading this week. When President George W. Bush encountered this issue, he went and asked the National Academy of Sciences to do yet another report, which, you know, if you're not clear on the issue, is the right thing to do. One might ask why somebody is still not clear on the issue. But if the point of the National Academy of Sciences charge is to advise the president and the U.S. government on matters of science. It's not a politically appointed organization. They were charged by Congress with that role, and they appoint their own people. You really have to be somebody special to be elected to the National Academy of Sciences. This is a press release talking about their report. This is from, the National Research Council and the National Academy. These reports now state that the state of climate change science is strong, but the nation also needs the scientific community to expand on its understanding of why climate change is saying. Okay, so here's the link to this thing, Advancing the Science of Climate Change, which is one of these reports written by the National Academy of Sciences. And they come right out here that says, description, climate change is occurring and is largely caused by human activities and poses significant risk for, and in many cases is already affecting a broad range of natural and human systems. Okay. What I'm getting at here is that in spite of the uncertainty that's portrayed in the U.S. media, the scientific community in an overwhelming sense believes that this process is real. And while maybe not every little detail is figured out, the point here in the president, they're endorsing this story that I'm about to tell you. And I'm going to try to pitch this thing to you in a way that you can understand. And I think that it will also bring a lot of the ideas from the course together and get them in one place. Okay, so this is the way the rest of this little video spiel will go here. Okay, so I'm going to construct sort of a logical proof here. Okay, for anthropogenic climate change to be plausible. Okay, a little nod to Mythbusters there, right? I'm going to say this is if C, then T. We've talked about this before. Okay, so C is stands for carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, or we could broaden that to say this is humans have done something to affect the climate system, and T is that the temperature increasing. So again, in a logic sense, we would say if C, then T. So the idea, what we want to prove is that if we raise levels of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, that'll reach and that'll cause an increase in global average temperature. For this to be true, one, temperature must be increasing. Two, carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases and other things must be increasing. In other words, this isn't true if that's not true or if that's not true. Otherwise, it's kind of a silly statement. So, I mean, this needs to be going on and this needs to be going on, and we need to prove that. Then we need to sort of show the evidence for a mechanistic relationship between the two. When we looked at the data from the Vostok ice core, we saw an empirical relationship between the two, meaning that if temperature goes up and CO2 goes up, or CO2 goes up and temperature goes up, and those two quantities track together, something based strictly on observations is what we would call an empirical relationship. What we want to look for is a mechanistic or a causal relationship between the two, and I will show you that what we have in that respect. And for me, I find it to be pretty convincing.